Now, I know it sounds like a bit of a trap, right? I'm going to say you're going to get all these amazing things and you're going to get fitter, you're going to feel better, you're not going to walk around sore and tired and fatigued all the time, but yet it's going to be easy. Most people would think that I'm probably lying right now. However, with the right program, with the right approach to your training, with the right periodized program, you can be fitter, lighter on your feet, faster, without necessarily pushing yourself to the absolute limits. And that's where your aerobic training comes in, and that's why your aerobic base is going to be absolute king compared to pretty much everything else that you can do. If you haven't got a good aerobic base, all of the fancy work that you can do, the cadence work, the strength work, the threshold work, the anaerobic work, the top end work that you can do at the gym and or outdoors, almost becomes useless if you haven't got the foundation of your fitness properly built. And that's where we're going to dive in. How do you build your aerobic base? Let's do it now. Okay, so I'd like to welcome you back to the Morris Method YouTube channel. Now, if you're interested in weight loss, endurance training, triathlon specific, running specific training, you're gonna wanna hit subscribe and don't forget to hit the bell icon to make sure that you get notified every time that I post a new video. All right, so let's jump straight into this one, and we're gonna be discussing how you can run faster, cycle faster, swim faster with minimal effort. Okay, so my first recommendation is going to be obviously finding out what your actual aerobic zone is going to be. Now, there are a few different ways that you can find out what your aerobic zone is, and you may have heard of zone 1 to 5 type training as well. So let's talk about the 220 minus your age formula, which is predominantly what a lot of people will use to try and find out their different zones. So zone 1 is that 50 to 59%. Zone 2 is going to be that 60 to 69. Obviously working from zone 3, zone 4, zone 5 up to that 90% bracket of heart rate. Okay, so that's using the 220 minus your age formula. In my experience, that's what I got taught at our certificates when we first learned fitness and when we first kind of dived into the industry. Here at the Morris Method Coaching, we don't go by that specific measurement, although it can come in handy, and it's a great way for people to start to try and find out, what different zones that they're going to be working in at different times. And if you'd like more information, I'm more than happy to help you out on those different zone style of training. However, for the Morris Method and the way that we like to do things is more of the MAF, the MAF method type style of training, at least using that formula. If you haven't heard of this formula, it just stands for maximum aerobic function. And this came from Dr. Phil Maffetone, who has done extensive research about what sort of heart rate you should be working at, not only to oxidize the most amount of fat in your aerobic zone, and what is allowing your body to efficiently keep your form without your form breaking down, particularly while we're trying to build your aerobic conditioning and your aerobic base. So that's the first thing that you need to do, is you need to find out exactly where your aerobic zone is going to be. Now, if you were to jump on to coaching with us, a lot of the time we take things even extra careful depending on the person that we're going to be working with, depending on their past experience. A lot of the time, working with these percentages, the 220 minus your age, gives too much variability, allows people to kind of go a little bit too high. And in my experience, both myself and a lot of clients tend to end up increasing that percentage and end up training too often within the black zone intensity, okay? So the aerobic base is all about keeping it light. Keeping your body within the aerobic zone is going to be more of a challenge mentally than actually physically. Now, what I mean by that is because you're going at a slower rate, it sounds or it feels counterproductive. Just because when a workout feels hard, you tend to think that it's doing you a lot of things because you can actually feel it working. Now that goes from pretty much anything from about the 75, 80, and obviously the 90% perceived effort and or your heart rate effort. If you're working in those sorts of intensities way too regularly, your effort versus reward doesn't seem to be matched, and you'll end up just putting all this effort in, and you can feel it working, but your body's response, it's just the wrong hormetic zone, meaning that your body's not going to adapt appropriately. So if your goal is to get good at endurance, and namely speaking, if your goal is to work your aerobic zone, you need to dictate and have a very clear outcome as to what is your aerobic capacity and what is your aerobic zone that you stay with. So Morris method here, we go by the MAF, the maximum aerobic function exam that we start with, and then we build it down from there in an LAHR method. LAHR just stands for low aerobic heart rate. So you can understand that MAF is your maximum aerobic function, LAHR, which is what here at Morris Method we prescribe, which is actually a zone beneath your MAF. So even when you think that you're already working out easier at an MAF or MAF method, a lot of the time when I get runners or cyclists or triathletes come in, we still have to pull back because of the life stresses that they're already experiencing. And if you just slightly work out just slightly too hard, one, you're not going to improve your aerobic base, and two, you're going to apply way too much of the wrong hormetic zone, meaning that you're not going to see any of the endurance adaptations that you're actually after. And making sure that you can stay true to training intensity discipline. That can be really hard to do. And that's where I lead you into point number 2. When we first start with a client here at Morris Method Coaching, we do a review, and the first few weeks are still reviewing this client as to one, where they're at, and learning more about where they've actually come from. Some of the flaws that people have when they're just trying to improve their endurance or improve their pace at running, cycling, swimming. Throughout the week, when you look at their program, they're trying to tick all of the boxes. And a lot of the time, one, because of the lifestyle that majority of people lead, they're already super busy, but you're applying all of the different modalities within the 1 week, right? You've got, say, a couple of easy runs, which is technically supposed to be your aerobic training. Then you've got a sprint or a hill session to try and get some pace and try and get some speed under the legs. Then typically on the weekend, you've probably got a long run, right? If this is you applying this sort of type of structure of training, I'm going to provide you with an answer right now that you want to stop that immediately. By putting yourself in a position where you're doing all these different modalities within every single week, you're actually not going to be putting yourself in the right hormetic zone so that you can get the adaptations that you're actually after. Because we're on the topic of aerobic training, my second point is making sure that you block out anywhere between 12 and 16 weeks of pure training intensity discipline. Now, what I'm referring to in training intensity discipline is to know that you're in an aerobic base or aerobic building training block, and you do not allow yourself to allow that heart rate to creep up into an anaerobic zone. That's what I mean by training intensity discipline. To be disciplined, to actually continue to keep your pace at a point where you're in the aerobic zone. And I know a lot of people have a lot of problem with that because it feels like when you do an aerobic session appropriately, you can finish the session and you feel completely fine. And that's the whole idea around it. If you want to just start building your aerobic conditioning, get out of your head your sprint sessions, your hill sessions, your interval sessions, your threshold work, even your long runs where your heart rate's doing this the whole time. You want to focus on controlling your intensity for at least 12 to 16 weeks, depending on your current status of fitness. Okay, and that leaves me with my last little point here that I'm going to bring up. And the third point is going to be cross training. Depending on what sport that you're actually coming from, whether it's running, cycling, or swimming, a lot of these times, the best part is when you work the aerobic zone, you can do it on a whole bunch of different activities. So let's say that you're specifically into running. Now, sometimes your musculoskeletal system, your ankles, your knees might not be able to deal with all that extra volume. So the best part is you can work your aerobic conditioning while you're doing a different activity, potentially giving your body or your activity, your specific activity, a little bit of a breather. If you're running and you're finding that you're actually getting a little bit injured too chronically, but you want to build your aerobic base, my recommendation is to pull in a bit of a stationary bike, maybe a cross trainer at the gym, or potentially even some swimming, depending on what experience that you have with that type of sport. By allowing you to cross train just slightly, you're obviously not being super specific on the actual sport itself that you're after. However, it allows you to still train and work your aerobic zone. If you're feeling like you're a little bit tired, say in the muscles, in the legs, in the feet from your running, well then jumping on a bike where there's no impact is going to be a great way for you to, one, still increase your volume, still hit your aerobic zone, but potentially just give your running a bit of a breather until those muscles and the joints and things kind of feel a bit better and they're a bit more recovered. So that would be my point number 3, is to feel free to cross train just slightly. And again, you don't want to pull away from your major focus, but allowing it and using it as a tool so that you can continue to build this aerobic base of yours 12 to 16 weeks. And that's absolutely something that I will do pretty much all year round. Now, I am predominantly a runner, particularly in the bush. However, I will use that type of sport and those types of activities as my aerobic training recovery type session. So you'll see me on the bike and using the swimming as, there's no impact, a little bit of different muscular work, but I still get to work my aerobic zone. So those are my 3 points that I want you to focus on if you're just starting out in trying to build a better aerobic base. Number 1, you need to find out what your zone is going to be initially. And a lot of the time, I would highly recommend go easier than what you think easy already is. Point number 2 is going to be you block out a very specific amount of time so that you can allow your body to hit that right hormetic zone. Not going from an aerobic or an easy or an LAHR session to then the next day doing an interval session to the next day going back to an aerobic session. You want to be very specific with the adaptation that you're after. That's super duper important. And then number 3 is feel free to start cross training a little bit. If you want to do a little bit of swimming, do a little bit of cycling to help your running, or vice versa. It is a great way for you to continue to build your aerobic base without chronically overdoing one activity at a time. Alright, so that brings me here to another end with another Morris Method coaching tutorial video. Guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you got something out of it, please make sure you put something down in the comments for me. Hit like if you enjoyed the video. Otherwise, there'll be another video coming out next week on the same sort of topics: endurance training, weight loss, lifestyle habits, you name it. And I'm going to be doing it to make sure that you can live the healthiest and happiest life that you can.